First of all, may I thank the former leader of the opposition and the leader of the Tamil National Alliance, Honorable Sambandhan, for moving this adjournment motion on constitutional reforms and the national question today. Mr. Speaker, following the attempted coup and Easter Sunday bombings, many of our fellow citizens asked why our country continues to veer from one crisis to another. In fact, if they are asking that question, they are right to do so. The history of Sri Lanka, I believe, is a history of crisis. In the last 70-odd years, we experienced the assassination of a prime minister, the assassination of an executive president, a failed coup, 2 youth insurgencies, and a long, bloody civil war. With one or two exceptions, the common thread uniting the crisis is the national question, the question of how our many communities can live together in amity and flourish collectively. Prime Minister S.W.R.D. Bandaranaike was assassinated because of his attempt at conciliation with the minorities, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The 1962 coup was significantly induced by fear of discrimination against Christians. The war, as our academics and intelligence men have observed, was the direct result of treating minorities in this country as second-class citizens. At this point, Mr. Speaker, it would be amiss not to reflect on the lessons of Black July. In fact, this week, 36 years ago, from the 24th of July to the 30th of July, the state failed to protect thousands of its own citizens who were slaughtered in their homes and on the street. We all know that if there was any one cause for a ragtag insurgency becoming a full-blown civil war, it was Black July. Similarly, it cannot be a coincidence that the Easter Sunday bombings took place following the Alutgama and Digana riot. Although investigations are still underway, there is no reason to think that these riots played a role in radicalizing a few Muslim youths. Even though these issues consume the energies of this House and the entire island since independence, it is clear that we have failed to resolve this matter successfully. Despite new constitutions, countless committees and endless debate, we still have majoritarianism entrenched in our politics and law. The stakes could not be higher. It is our inability to resolve the national question that is at the very center of our failure to make Sri Lanka peaceful and prosperous. Sri Lanka has been in crisis, remains in crisis, and will continue to be in crisis until we can create a just and equal Sri Lanka for all Sri Lankans. Mr. Speaker, the House knows that the solution to this problem, it has always known the solution to this problem, but more often than not, the members have not had the courage of their conviction to address it. Ever since independence, all our leaders, including Honorable Mahinda Rajapaksa, know the actual solution to this problem. It has covered before a small but vocal minority of reactionary forces, and I'm sad to say that a truly united Sri Lanka, a Sri Lanka where Muslims don't fear Buddhists, where Sinhalese don't fear Tamils, and where Christians can worship in peace, is a cause of mortal danger for certain members of this House. That Sri Lanka's future as a prosperous, united and undivided country depends on establishing a constitution that would embrace and celebrate Sri Lanka's multicultural, multi-ethnic, multilinguistic identity based on the principles of equal citizenship, justice and the devolution of power. They understood the importance of building a Sri Lankan identity and a Sri Lankan constitution which all of Sri Lanka's communities equally can claim as their own. In fact, all our national leaders, as I said, including our good friend, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, have considered ensuring equal rights and a measure of self-government as essential for the country's stability, security and prosperity. The first Prime Minister of Sri Lanka, who was also the founder of the UNP, D.S. Senanayake, strongly believed in unity in diversity. He emphatically remarked after the unfurling of the national flag. This was the first speech made in independent Sri Lanka on the 4th of February 1948. I quote, "Our nation comprises many races, each with a culture and a history of its own. It is for us to blend all that is best in us. There is no greater ambition in my life than to get all these communities together." He also went on to note that for centuries, the Sinhalese and Tamils have lived together in peace and unity. We have been governed by their king and they by ours. D.S. Senanayake's policy has been always the policy of the United National Party. The last UNP president, the late Ranasinghe Premadasa, said so in his speech, "Arms cannot bring peace." I quote from his speech, Multi-ethnic democracy has always been my vision for Sri Lanka. There is no other way. It has been my vision from the time I entered politics. My electorate in Colombo was multi-ethnic. I could not have represented my electorate for so many years, but had I not practiced multi-ethnic politics. Furthermore, now as president, my electorate is the whole country. I am the president for all groups and communities who comprise Sri Lanka. This was Ranasinghe Premadasa in 1990 March. If whatever the race, the religion or the caste that any individual belongs to, we must realize that he or she has a birthright to share of this country. It is only if that right is denied to persons on grounds of difference of race, religion, caste or other such considerations that a threat of division of this country will arise, that a threat to the sovereignty of this country will arise, and foreign powers will have an opportunity to interfere in our efforts. President Premadasa also had the sagacity to appoint Mangala Munasinghe, an SLFP member of this House, to chair the Parliamentary Select Committee on this topic. It is also important to note that the committee's report recommended a scheme of devolution on lines similar to the Indian Constitution, in other words, federalism. Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe too has been a worthy custodian of this UNP legacy and has always stood for a political solution for the national question. Similarly, leaders of other main political parties, the Sri Lanka Freedom Party, the two shared this view. Prime Minister S.W.R.D. Bandaranaike, who was the SLFP founder leader, said in Parliament in August 5, 1958, I quote, "I am satisfied that extremism in this country consists of the activities of a small minority, whether they are Sinhalese or Tamil. But the vast majority of the people are reasonable and moderate and only wish to live together with mutual respect as well as self-respect, so that they could march forward together and achieve that progress and that question for all of us which had been hoping to obtain under this freedom we have. Freedom for the Sinhalese, yes, remember too, that it is the freedom for the Tamils, for the Muslims, for the Malays, for the Burghers, who are all fellow citizens. Yes, if it's not freedom that way for all, I too repeat the words of another leader, Sri Jawaharlal Nehru, who stated that if freedom means internal communal strife for injustice or suppression of minorities, to hell with freedom, to hell with Swaraj. This was his long-standing opinion. It was based on his views that centralized government was imposed on us by the colonizers before. Speaking in Jaffna on the 17th of July 1926, his talk titled Federation as the Only Solution to Our Political Problems described Sri Lanka's pre-colonial system of government as decentralized and similar to a loose federation. He stated that British introduced centralized form of government and argued was unsuitable for our country like Ceylon. He also reported to have said in Ceylon, each province should have complete autonomy. Earlier that year, in May and June, he wrote 6 articles in the Ceylon Morning Leader making the case for federalism. Allow me to quote, "There would be trouble if centralized form of government was introduced into countries with large communal differences." But his daughter tried to set things right. President Chandrika Kumaratunga was brave enough to stand on election platforms and speak truth to power. In fact, I remember Chandrika Kumaratunga coming to Akurasa in 1993 as the Chief Minister of the Western Province, and in the deep south where 90% were Sinhala Buddhists, she said Sri Lanka needs a federal system. And at the elections, we had a resounding landslide even after that statement was made. She had the courage to boldly state in public what the political class said in private. The solution to the natural question was federalism. I remember the leader of the opposition now, President Mahinda Rajapaksa, supporting the 1995 Union of Regions proposals. He held his view for a long time. In fact, you made one of the best speeches a leader of our country has made at the inaugural sessions of the All-Party Representative Committee on the 11th of July 2016. long before you chased me out, where I was also present. And he summarized the main thrust of his proposed solution to the ethnic conflict. I want to quote you, Honorable Leader of the Opposition, from 2006, what you said. I quote, Honorable Mahinda Rajapaksa, people in their own localities must take charge of their destiny and control their politico-economic environment. Central decision-making that allows disproportionate resources has been an issue for a considerable time. In addition, it is axiomatic that devolution also needs to address issues relating to identity as well as security and socio-economic advancement without over-reliance on the center. In this regard, it is also important to address the question of regional minorities. In sum, any solution needs to, as a matter of urgency, allows people to take charge of their own destiny. This has been tried successfully in many parts of the world. There are many examples from around the world that we may study as we evolve a truly Sri Lankan constitutional framework, including our immediate neighbor India. This is what you said at the opening of the all-party conference. It's a long speech, I'm not going to, but by even saying that he wants to look at India, he is also endorsing a federal model for Sri Lanka, which all leaders of this country, in fact, not only you, even the left leaders, including Honorable Dinesh Gunawardana's own brother, Honorable Indika Gunawardana, they all endorsed it. In his concluding speech, remarks of that speech, again he was very firm. Any solution must be seen as one that stretches to the maximum possible devolution. This is Honorable Mahinda Rajapaksa. Thank you. But I am sorry that you had to change your views under pressure from various other people. On January 9, 2016, the next leader of the SLFP, President Sirisena, made his views on the matter very clear to the House. Attempts to build cooperation and friendship among Sinhala, Tamil, Muslim, Buddhist, Catholics, Hindu, Malay and Burgher failed. Communities became increasingly polarized owing to the shortcomings and loopholes formed in the constitutional provisions promulgated in the country, triggered by the provisions contained in the Salisbury Constitution. This resulted in the creation of the terrorist known as Prabhakaran. Regardless of what people say, I am of the belief that the Bandaranayaka-Chelvanayagam Pact had become a reality, we would not have witnessed the creation of terrorism.
Yeah, 2 more minutes.
And then, as I said, the left leaders also endorsed his view throughout our independence era. LSSP leader Dr. Colvin R. De Silva, his prophetic words during the 1956 debate on the Sinhala-only bill were prophetic then, but useless and we act now. I fear all too sadly they will prove to be doubly prophetic if we don't act now. I want to quickly, because it's very important that a new generation knows what our left leaders talked about. I quote, if you refuse to help a section of our people of a specific racial stock, having their own separate language, their specific and particular culture, traditions and history, if you deny them their language rights, then you are running the risk of hammering them in the future into what they are not. Today they are but a certain distinctive reason of their particular racial stock and language from the Sinhalese within the Ceylonese nation. But if you mistreat them, if you ill-treat them, if you misuse them, if you oppress and add to that process, you may cause to emerge in Sri Lanka from that particular shock with its own particular language and tradition, a new nationality for which we will have to concede more claims than it puts forward now. It is always wiser statesmanship to give generously early instead of being niggardly too late. Partly, he argued, is the road to freedom of our nation and the unity of our component. Otherwise, two torn little bleeding states may yet arise of one little state. This was way back, Dr. Colvin R. De Silva in 1956. And even the founder leader of the JVP, Rohana Vijayveera, supported these views and went further than the others on the left. In a speech that can be watched on YouTube, he argued in Jaffna, 1982, that the solution to the ethnic conflict was acknowledging and respect the right of minorities to self-determination. This is the leader of the JVP. We propose to create areas of self-rule where minority communities have large concentration. We state that any ethnic committee or any minority group has the right to self-determination. And then the late Indika Gunawardena, leader of the Communist Party, stood by this in this very house 19 years ago during the constitutional debate and said, I quote, the standpoint of the Marxist movement is the right to make self-decision should not be denied to any citizen. The right of a nation to self-determination is upheld by the working class. A separate state of Elam will never be a solution to the national problem. The best way to grant the right to make self-decision to various ethnic groups to create a united Sri Lanka will be autonomous administration in the north and the east. And finally, all I want to say is we are at a rare moment in history where the Tamil political leadership is united and represented by a great statement in the shape of Honorable R. Sambandans. His stature, wisdom and temperament is not only a bonus for the Tamil community but for the whole of Sri Lanka. This may not be the case in the future. We must not let this opportunity go. We must answer the offer and the question we place. In fact, in Matara, he came to an event in Matara just 2 weeks ago, and I would like to quote Honorable Sambandan. Actually, it was an excellent speech where all the people of the South, at the end of his speech, Honorable Mahinda Abewardena all stood up and gave him a standing ovation. And I think the whole speech is worth listening to, but I quote a little bit. I want to work with fellow Sri Lankans to resolve this conflict within the framework of a united, undivided, indivisible Sri Lanka. That would be the best thing for Sri Lanka. If we do not, what would be the consequences? He ended the speech with that question, which I believe that all of us, whichever party, whichever side, whichever community, whichever religion we believe in, must start asking ourselves, if we do not solve this issue, what are the consequences? And can Sri Lanka move forward unless we come to terms with the fact that Sri Lanka is a multi-ethnic, multi-religious, multicultural nation?